Hey, Pat here, and today I have my special guest that we do our annual episode. I've got Eric Cressey with me.
Welcome to the Fitness Business School podcast, the show for fitness business owners who want to grow their income, increase their impact, and improve their lifestyle. Be sure to listen till the end of this episode because we have a brand new special offer exclusive for listeners. So stay tuned.
Eric probably doesn't need much introduction, but I'm still going to give him a little introduction as we go. And Eric is the founder, owner, and I say that knowing they're co-owners, but I don't know the entire ownership structure of everything of Cressey Sports Performance. I know Pete has been with you along the way for the growth of all this. There, you've got CSP in Massachusetts, CSP in Florida, but you're also, what's the exact title with the Yankees?
Director of Player Health and Performance.
Yes, I'm sure I would have fumbled right through that. And Eric's kind of done a little bit of everything in the fitness performance landscape, from information products all the way through quarterbacking the entire department for the most renowned professional sports team in North America. There's a lot there. And above all else, Eric has just been a wonderful friend for a long time now. We're just talking about the length of that friendship before we started recording. So welcome, Eric.
Thank you very much. That was a highlight of the year to do this.
I'd say the highlight probably was the championship that the girls won last night, right? Or
yeah, I guess so. We'll take it.
Eric's diving into the youth sports world that I feel like I've been immersed in for a while. That could be a fun separate conversation.
We're coming up on 10U softball and lots of gymnastics. You're right. We're in the thick of it.
Man, usually when we've done these, I just start by asking what's been new in your world during the past year. So let's lead off with that.
Yeah, for sure. So we're recording this on February 4th. So it's I guess the first chance to come up for air after a busy baseball offseason. We still have a lot of our guys that are here. Major League report dates are usually February 13th, 14th, give or take. So this is the Sunday night before the last, week of crazy training. But a lot of our players, minor league guys that might go to early camp, certainly all of our college players have gone back by now. So we see like a gradual slowing down as January progresses, but there will be some minor league guys that'll still be around till the end of February before they report, and then independent ball guys after that. And there are always rehab guys around and things to that effect. But I head out for my Yankee stuff to get going with spring training here in about 9 days as well. So we're coming up on my other full-time job.
Man, yes. Between holding down the fort at the Cressey home and CSP and the Yankees, you got plenty on your plate. So over the last year, has anything evolved, changed that you want to talk about with CSP?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's been interesting in the sense that I think we're another one of those critical junctions in business where we always talk. I'm sure you give the same advice. I know there are other folks in this industry in the business consulting space who are like, if you're going to fail big, it's always easy advice to give when you're spending somebody else's money. I think when it's your own, you would agree, I'm sure, is like sometimes it's start small, give yourself opportunities to expand, to grow, flexible lease terms, things along those lines. And we've always done that, where we started in 2007 with like this 3,300 square foot candy cane shaped facility in a dungeon in Hudson, Mass. And then we grew a year later. We went to a 6,600 square foot facility, grew out of that, added another 1,000 square feet a couple years later. And then we went into our showcase location in Massachusetts back in the summer of 2012. And it's the facility that we're in to this day. Florida, we opened up in 2014, opened up as basically a 7,700 square foot, give or take, facility, no baseball amenities in-house. We would have to drive to go do that stuff. And we were there 5 years, and we quickly realized, like, in order to do what we wanted to do, we needed to expand, right? We needed to have rehab opportunities with physical therapists on site. We needed to have massage therapists, hitting, pitching coaches, analytics crews, all those people to really deliver what we wanted. So we were fortunate to go into a public-private partnership with the city of Palm Beach Gardens, where we really got our own effectively spring training complex. It's a 10,000 square foot space with a turf field, a stadium size field, cages, mounds, everything we could really need from a baseball development space. But what we never really appreciated was we moved into that facility December 27th, 2019. We trained guys for a month and a half, just like while the paint was still drying. We figured, all right, everybody's going to take off, go to spring training. We're going to have a chance to come up for air, plan for the long term. And then COVID hit. And what happened in COVID during that time is there are 1,000 new residents to the state of Florida every day. The state just took off. There were a lot of people that headed here from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Chicago, all these places. And a lot of them were baseball players. So we were in a perfect storm situation from 2020 to 2024, where on top of that, we had the Major League Baseball lockout for a period, which really surged business. So we've grown exponentially since then. And what you never really think about is when you build a gym, you want to live in it for a few months before you make big decisions on, before you start bolting equipment down to the floor. Let's see how the flow of the facility is. And our staff grew exponentially. So now we're just at a point where we have no place to put all of them, right? We have 3 physical therapists and 1 treatment room. We have 2 massage therapists, 1 treatment room. I share my office with 2 other coaches. We have coaches that are setting up shop in our staff lounge just because we grew so quickly that we didn't really have enough administrative space in our business. And we also are feeling out like the complexities of our relationship with the town, which is great, but there are ways that we feel like we can expand on and stuff. So we're actively in discussions to build another building, knock down a wall, expand a little bit. So just to do a lot of creative things. And there isn't like a strong revenue component to it. It's very much about finding ways for us to efficiently both serve our clients and give them a better experience, but also to just give our staff a little room to breathe and move around and stuff. It's one of those things where you're always just like wondering, like, all right, if I reinvest, like, what's the timeline to recoup that investment? How big should I go? Should I swing for the fences this time? And I think it's just a different experience now where I'm 42. When we first opened the facility in 2007, I was 26 years old. I had $127,000 and I invested everything in our facility. And I didn't know any better. I was just oblivious to it. And if I put it in the market, I would have lost half of it in the year that followed. But I fortunately put into a business that appreciated. But now it's a little bit of a different kind of stakes where you're at the point now where I have 9-year-old daughters and we're paying for college. We got a mortgage. There's over 20 staff members there. So you want to make sure not to just make silly haphazard decisions once the stakes are really high like this. So I think the thing I've learned is you get quotes from a bunch of different contractors. You don't just take the first one that comes your way. You do a ton of digging on references, and you have plan A, B, C, and D to figure out what the right fit is for you, because you don't want to be like that NBA player that gave 15 million to his uncle and said, just go do real estate investing. Like, we want to be smart with this and make sure it actually adds value to our experience.
Yeah, you definitely just stair-stepped your way through growth. It was the back of a batting cage in the beginning, and now this is such a different thing. And that's probably why I'm not much for what I always feel like is radio talk show type advice, where it's I'm gonna just give something that's a soundbite that fits between the commercials. And man, every situation's different, and the advice you give somebody that doesn't have 3 kids and lots of responsibilities and whatever else shouldn't be the same advice that you give somebody that doesn't have those kind of responsibilities or obligations or priorities.
I feel that way when I talk to career change folks, when people are 47 and they hate what they've been doing and they're like, oh, should I go and get an exercise science degree? I'm like, should you spend $250,000 or $300,000 that probably won't inherently qualify you to do something different? You can get in a weekend certification. Like, I'm all for the career change side of things, but is that the most efficient plan? Because you can recoup that money when you're 25 and doing it. It's really hard if you're in your mid 40s, you haven't saved for retirement, you're taking care of kids, all this stuff. It's just, I always have felt awkward when people ask me to give them advice in that front. I'm like, hey, you got to make sure you earn back double that amount within the next 7 years to make sure that you're beating the historical rate of return since the Great Depression.
Yeah. And I feel like that's my job most weeks. Yeah, it is much easier when people just talk about hypotheticals, but when you're talking about somebody's actual life, yeah, what you're saying is 100% true. It's they don't operate in a vacuum. There are just so many other variables to be considered. So
to steal a Pat Rigsbyism that I know I've heard you use, both probably in conversation and in some of your newsletters. It's bigger isn't better is better. And I think there's just maybe it's social media that does it. Like, and I'm probably guilty of it. I'm like, there are probably people that look at our facility and are like, oh my gosh, I got to have a baseball complex. And there's some amazing coaches out there making a huge difference in 1,500 square foot warehouses that are changing lives. So I always tell people like if it's not always for you. Nobody got into this business wanting to have 25 employees. It just happens. And before you know it, if you have 25 employees, one of them is going to screw something up every day. That doesn't make them bad people. It just means that you have to understand how to deal with those challenges on a daily basis.
And the evolution, when somebody says, hey, I want to have a business that is of this magnitude, this size, this much revenue, or whatever else, you understand that bears very little resemblance to what you do now, right? It's a lot of different responsibilities and moving parts. And so be careful what you wish for, right? And social media, I think you're spot on, really feeds that because there's that kind of comparison syndrome instead of just thinking, okay, what would be better for me? And it's a little bit like the headlight mentality. Like you don't really know until you get a little closer to it. Like you got to be able to see it as you approach it because you couldn't have probably considered all the variables that have happened during the pandemic, post pandemic. There's no way you could have worked through that in a business plan.
Yeah.
You guys were talking about, I remember us talking about Florida a couple of years before the actual move.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way to forecast some of that stuff. You had to
Yeah.
kind of get upon.
People talk about 3 and 5 and 10-year plans. I'll be honest, like I even like the context of like periodization for athletes. Oh, you got a 4 month off season, you do this in months 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm like, I have ideas of adaptation I want to create, but I very rarely would ever write 2 months of programming at a time. We go month to month because you never know who's going to get the flu and lose 15 pounds or get into a fight with his wife. And there's just so many different things that can impact how these things turn out. So I think the business life cycle is the same. My wife and I, our first date was in April of 2007. And on our first date, I told her, I never want to own a gym. And I opened one July 13th of that year. Like it literally changed in under 3 months. So we often joke about it. And she works crazy hours right alongside me in our business now too. So it's amazing how things have changed in that time period.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember the point when she wasn't working in the business. And Holly, I recall very vividly, Holly had her own separate fitness for moms thing, and now she is neck deep in the stuff that I've been doing so long, and it's a completely different dynamic and everything else, and you got to do it to figure it out. Again, that's not one of those things that there's a blueprint for.
Yeah, and you learn as you go. I think every business is inherently unique in a lot of different ways. And the secret is just don't make the same mistakes twice, right? It's one thing to screw something up, but if you're not learning from that and making some kind of a correction so it doesn't happen again, you're obviously setting yourself up for failure. And I can't even begin to describe how many times we've just looked back and we were idiots for trying that and it didn't work. But now we know. Even just like how we onboard new staff members and like the type of people that we hire, all these different things we've learned so much. So it comes with time, and we're 16, 17 years deep on this now.
Yeah. What's interesting is I know before we started, and for anybody listening in, we don't exactly have a playbook for each of these episodes. It's just a free-flowing conversation. I know that I said, hey, I wanted to talk about some timeless stuff, and we led in with, hey, what's new? It seems like we've almost gravitated that way as we've gone.
I
So
like it.
you've done things in every corner of the industry, as we've talked about, and you still are pretty prolific in sharing information and empowering other coaches with a lot of valuable free stuff.
Mhm.
There have been programs like Show and Go along the way.
Yeah.
Uh, so there's probably not a whole lot that somebody listening to this is going to say, this is what my business looks like, or this is what I do that you haven't had some sort of experience with. So I wanted to ask, since you've been doing this since the 2007 kind of range to now, What are the things that have held true that haven't changed or maybe haven't evolved as much? So the more durable things.
Yeah, when you said that from the start, the first thing I come back to is know your numbers. It's non-negotiable, and that's through different presidential administrations, different tax rates, different depreciation strategies, all these different things. You have to know it. And if you don't know it, you better have an amazing accountant who does know it and presses you to learn about it. That's something that was always very near and dear. I wrote my high school career paper on being a certified public accountant. I had five of them in my family, my brother, my sister-in-law, my cousin, my late uncle. Like, I've been around it for a really long time. And I actually went to school thinking I was going to be an accountant, and obviously changed gears and did exercise science and sports and fitness management and all that. But I think that's something that served me incredibly well, is always just like understanding accounting, business structures, all of that. It was really drilled home. My brother worked as a basically an accountant at a company that did a lot of small business stuff. And honestly, my stuff, when I started doing more information products, and I had both like 1099 and W-2 revenue, like it started getting more complex. And he referred me to actually one of his coworkers. His name's Tom. Tom is unreal with small businesses. And it's funny, we've done like business mentorships. Tom has come and lectured at them. And we've had people that have followed up and just sent us an email, be like, your accountant saved me 10 grand. That was the best investment I've ever made on a seminar. So that's the stuff that is absolutely timeless, particularly if you have a longer term trajectory for whether it's growth, expansion, all that stuff. Like I have both of our 9-year-old daughters on the payroll. They actually help out at the gym. They both have basically not just 529 plans, but they have 401k, or excuse me, Roth IRA accounts. Just learning a lot of stuff along those lines is really important, because it's not just what you make, it's obviously what you keep and how you reinvest, and just strategically understanding how your business is trending. So I think that's absolutely generational, regardless of what time period you're in. But the other one I was actually going to say that maybe is a little bit more nuanced, because it stayed the same, but it's evolved a little bit, is I think you need to give people opportunities to perceive your expertise in a lot of different ways. And that early on was writing blogs, speaking at seminars, things like that. And obviously, once the facility gets going, people that walk in, maybe they see the jerseys on the wall, maybe they see the news articles that are written about you, maybe they interact with you, ask questions, they talk to your staff, maybe they bump into another satisfied player or parent or something like that while they're out and about. But everybody perceives expertise differently. And I think the way the law of repeated exposures has evolved, I think you even had it in one of your books. It was like some studies on research on, wasn't it like on average, like the typical American purchases between the 10th and 12th marketing exposure. Very rarely do they just see something and buy it. And I think people are just so desensitized to social media messages and emails and all that stuff. Like, sometimes you have to hit them in a lot of different ways very frequently over an extended period of time. And I'm sure you're like me, like you have people that have been on your newsletter list for 9 years that eventually buy a product. And hey, thanks for tuning in for all these years. I'm glad it took you a long time to get there, but we appreciate your business. So I always come back to, I always want to make sure that we're out there in different ways. We want to do it professionally. We're not spamming people or anything like that, but everyone perceives expertise just a little bit differently. And I'll give you the best example. So I have twin 9-year-olds and a 4-year-old. They're all super into gymnastics. And we moved them to a new gymnastics place probably 4 months ago. And they have just taken off. They have learned so much, and not even just the skills that you see them executing, but like we now have a set of bars in our dining room instead of a table. We have 2 balance beams in our living room. Like my daughter, I have one who's a super early bird. Like at 6 a.m., she is out practicing on the balance beam in her pajamas every morning. It never happened in the other place. And literally it all took place over a period of 4 months. And I look back, and they went to a place that was almost like it's like an extension of my gym. It was just like, have fun with it, get excited. And then we took them to another place, and it was like herding cats. I don't think the coaches even knew their name. You walk in, the place wasn't super clean. It was just like chaos, like to the point that a kid could get hurt in a corner and you wouldn't even have known that they were hurt. We went to this place, everybody knows their name. It's a little bit more out of the way. They get to look across the room. They see some of the teenage girls who are like really into it, doing cool skills. Honestly, it's a much more diverse group. They get to interact with different ethnicities, different races, males and females. It's just been so much better for them. Like, they skyrocketed. For me, the expertise I perceive while they have my business is like everybody knew my kid's name. I saw them learning day to day. I saw them making new friends. I saw them practicing on their own without us having to encourage them to put in extra work. it's one of those things like for me, like I didn't need to go in and be like, hey, how do you teach a cartwheel? Like that wasn't going to be me. I don't know enough to really even have a seat at that table, but I saw how the coaches interacted with the athletes. And I'm a coach myself, like very nuanced, knowing names and understanding kinesthetic, verbal, external focus cues, internal focus cues. It was cool to me. So it might be totally different than the person who just found them on a Google search and happened to live closer to that facility. But it's been eye-opening for me as like a customer.
That's pretty cool. I don't want to overlook the fact that you have the bars in the dining room because that was something I don't even know if I told you, but like we turned our garage and it's turf and there's a pitching machine, there's a hit tracks, there's all
That's the
sorts.
way to do it.
But that kind of low friction
Mhm.
to, hey, if somebody wants to go do something, you make it really easily
Yep.
accessible. And I think the BJ Fogg stuff or James Clear stuff, they talk about that a lot. I'll tell you, I'm if you're familiar with Dan Hefner,
Yeah.
he actually drilled that home to me when I went down to Dallas Baptist at one point, and he just talked about how easy he made it for the players to get out on the field and do stuff. I thought that's what we need to do with the kids, just to make it. They don't need to have to go to the YMCA to do
Yeah.
something. Let's bring it to them.
Yeah. You don't change people, you change situations. That's what I always come back to. And it's actually a really good book. It was written by one of the founders of the Positive Coaching Alliance. And I'm forgetting the name of the book, but it actually talked a lot about the difference between males and females. Males, your little guy, like you guys compete. Hey, you got 29 points last time. We're going for 30. And if you get it, we get ice cream, something like that. Or hey, the neighbor did this. No, you got to do it. Girls don't do well with that at all. In fact, girls, they actually race away from the opportunity to be highlighted individually. Like even if they have the play of the game, they don't want to be celebrated. They don't want to do anything that's going to make other girls feel bad. And what I found about our girls is they won't just go outside and play catch with me, but if their friends are involved, they're all in. It's a little tricky with twins as well. So the more you can loop in teammates and things like that's the rising tide that lifts all ships. So it's been eye-opening because I've spent 95% of the athletes I've dealt with have been male, just being in the baseball world. And I had experience back at UConn in '03 to '05 with more female athletes, but it's 20 years later. It's been interesting being around a lot of female athletes in my own kids' lives.
Before I drift too far into just talking about youth sports stuff, what I love what you just said about exposing people repeatedly to your expertise. I think that one thing that a lot of business owners that I talk to lose sight of is it's our responsibility to do that. And it's gotten harder. It definitely is a more saturated environment. So it's not only harder to get somebody's attention, but attention retention
Yeah.
is incredibly challenging. And the fact that you have both repeated exposures, but then multi-channel exposures, that's, I think, huge. And I've said this a few times with clients, and I'm not really thinking about it from a political perspective, but it's if you're running for office, like you don't just run a Facebook ad.
Yeah.
Like you try to be everywhere that your potential voter is going to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like the closer we are to that, at least being able to do it in a way that still represents us really well. So you don't want to be places you're not going to be representing yourself at a high level, but closer we can do that, there's some benefit to it.
I agree with you 100%. And the hard part is, I think over the years, we've seen people who they just resist it. I don't want to go on social media. I'll be honest, I don't really love social media. I don't really have to Instagram for me is like feeding the monster. It'd be cool if I could post a cute picture of my kid once a month. But like I've created kind of this assumption of content. And it's funny. I remember a book actually it was Theo Epstein back in the day. He used the quote something like he called it feeding the monster, like the fan base always expected them to sign like a high profile free agent. Even if there wasn't somebody out there, they felt like they had to do it. And I feel like the same thing happens with content creation. I probably around 2012 or 13, we went on a vacation and I didn't send a newsletter for 5 days. And people were like emailing to be like, are you okay? Is something wrong? I'm like, yeah, I just didn't write an email for the last couple of days. So I got so in the habit. I know you write every single day. I pulled back on the amount I do. I think it's partially just because we're across so many platforms and stuff. And we do have a social media coordinator who helps out at the facility now, which has been helpful for taking some of it off of my plate. But yeah, it's something that some people just stubbornly resist. And it's fine if you want to do that, but you better have a different strategy for preserving top of mind awareness in your markets.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, most of the people who would listen to my podcast are, business people, though the minute I throw your name on there, I probably get a little more baseball attention, right? So with that being said, what's happening in the Yankee world?
Well, we're staying busy, that's for sure. It was a hectic off season. We're really excited about getting going here. It obviously wasn't a year that we wanted last year. So you always think the name of the game is always fail forward when things don't go well. And baseball's hard. There's one winner every year. And there's 29 other teams that go home disappointed. Obviously, there's a really a high standard of expectations in this world. I think the things that I've really learned is I think one of the maybe the appeals for the Yankees to come to me in the first place was that I had scaled 2 facilities in 2 states, and inherently in baseball, you have to scale. You have not just our major league roster that's taking place in New York and our affiliates. We have 3 of them in the Northeast, and we also have our Tampa complex where our low A team plays, and we have a Dominican academy. So we have a lot of employees, a lot of players in very different places. I just come back to that. My number one job is to be a teacher, to be someone who really works as an advocate for the staff and the department that I oversee. And that means whether it's hiring, whether it's budgeting, all that stuff. And I think people get really excited about like the X and O's of training. And don't get me wrong, those are super important. And I'm in the thick of those for sure. But I think one of the things that I've recognized is that honestly, I'm better at my job when people aren't talking about me, when they're talking about the players. And at the end of the day, it's about those guys, not so much me. So I've learned a lot over the course of time. And when I first took the job, one of the bits of advice I got from a longstanding staff member was these pinstripes can be very heavy, and they're heavy because there's a high standard of expectations that you're going to consistently win every year, and that's to me that's a privilege. That's way more fun than signing up for the season when you think you're going to finish in last place. That's not something that you want to be a part of. So it's been a cool honor.
Yeah, it's such a historic organization, and for you who got into the entrepreneurial side of things very early on,
Mhm.
um, it then getting into a different type of organization and operational structure. Yeah, I'm sure there were just a lot of learning experiences or learning opportunities, and so.
I was fortunate to test the waters. This is what I tell a lot of people. Like I'm very adamant in my world of advising younger coaches and stuff is don't just think either or. Sometimes and is the solution. And so one of the things, if you think back, we started CSP in 2007. So as of 2018, I'd been self-employed for obviously 11 years. So it was a long-standing thing where you get to the point where, am I employable? I just love autonomy so much. And where I was fortunate is I basically worked as a consultant for the Minnesota Twins for 2 years, surrounding sports medicine staffing, education, draft strategies, trades, things along those lines, and just really just advising the front office around things in my space. And it was an amazing opportunity. I'm super appreciative to Derek Falvey, who's the chief baseball officer there. He was a young guy who was in a similar timeline in terms of having young families. So you understand where I was coming from. And it was an awesome experience that really let me test the waters and like, hey, I really like this. It's a chance to find different ways to be the dumbest guy in a room, to learn, to contribute in different ways. And so it really was a great way for me to put my foot in the shallow end, see if it was the right fit, so that when the Yankees came calling, that I felt like I was more prepared and I knew a little bit more I was getting into. But at the end of the day, it's a very different role than training guys in the private sector in the off season. Like in the private sector, they pay to come and see you. They want to leverage 100% of your expertise. Like the adherence is really high, and you have them in person with you, at least in most cases. In a professional sports role, you're trying to close the gap between what you know and what you can actually implement. They may be remote, they may be all over the place. And we have close to 300 guys in our organization. It's hard to have a direct hand on every one of them. So you have to really impart your expertise, your thoughts, whatever it is. You have to empower other staff members to really work with them directly. So it's a little bit of a different leap of faith, but it's something that's been super rewarding in other ways. And I'm really glad I did it. I think I've become a much better leader, professional, coach, all that stuff from having experienced it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask is, okay, where have you grown? Where have you improved through it? So that's wonderful. And no, I don't know that I grew up a Yankees fan, but you being there and a couple other people that I'm
Yeah.
pretty familiar with at this point, they go Yankees, right?
Everybody comes around. I love it. So it's been a cool experience, very humbling. It's been unique too. I signed on and we had a pandemic 2 months later. So first year was a lot of trial by fire and a very atypical year, but I think we're in a better place now than when we were in the end of 2019. And I'm excited for what's ahead too.
So you you are balancing both the CSP side, the Yankee side, with also being a husband and a dad. How has that evolved as your girls have gotten older?
Yeah, for sure. And that's transparently, it's tough. I think knowing it's a very seasonal business as well is that, and you know how it is in the fitness industry, you work while others play. We're very seasonal. We're super busy in the month of December. So like our kids know it's really hard to travel for Christmas. It's hard to travel for Thanksgiving. It's just hard to travel, period. But I think what I've realized is that for everything you add, you have to take something away. So when I signed on with the Yankees, I basically, my wife and I sat down and said, I'm really not traveling for seminars anymore. And I had traveled a lot. I was doing sometimes 12, 13 of them a year. That's a lot of weekends away from the kids. And no, it's just a different kind of travel. Like you come back and you're exhausted after talking straight through for 2 days. It's interesting. I haven't traveled internationally since 2015, I realized. So since we had kids and took on the role in professional baseball, that's something I pulled back on a lot. And like I said, I'm not doing nearly as much content creation, whether it's writing, obviously product development, stuff like that. That's taken a back seat just because I've really thrown myself into this Yankees world on a number of different fronts. And then I think I'm very fortunate to have a great business partner and director of performance in Massachusetts, and Pete and John, who really take the lead on that facility. So I don't coach a lot there anymore. My name's obviously still on it, and I have an active role in it, but day to day, those guys really handle it. And I'm there some in the summertime, but I trust them to do a great job with it. And they've done an amazing, amount of work there since I became a full-time Florida guy. And then obviously I'm all in at CSP Florida, but I have some wiggle room to have a lot more autonomy once all these guys report to spring training. Being there in March, April, May, those are my times to really buckle down and do a lot of different stuff. Yeah, I think the hardest part of the year is actually finding vacation, if I'm being honest. And we're not really good at taking long vacations anyway. So it usually winds up being like a day or two here and there. And a lot of times it's planned around the baseball schedule. We'll be playing the Red Sox and my wife will come to a couple games at Fenway and stay at the team hotel or something like that.
Good. Yeah. It's a moving target too, as they
Yeah.
grow. What time with them, what time away looks like.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
is
If you know what I remember, I think it was Randy Zuckerberg, his Mark's sister, I think, who did a talk, and she said, I think it was family, friends, fitness, career, sleep. Pick three. And I've never been a good sleeper. Like I'm a terrible sleeper. I'm hoping it doesn't catch up to me someday. And fitness has obviously been very important. Family is obviously very important, and career is very important. Where I'm fortunate is I get 3.5 because most of our friends are in one way or another associated with the gym, the baseball world, something like that. Like 2 of our retired athletes are my daughter's softball coaches. Like we went out to breakfast this morning with one of our major league relief pitchers whose wife also trains at the gym, and they just had a new baby, and our daughters were all excited to see them. So it all blends together. But yeah, we don't have a raging social life outside the gym, especially because Anna and I work together. And most of the time after the kids are in bed, we're having like business meetings and going through accounting or whatever it is. But that's a lesson I've learned, is if you can double dip in there, things work great. But yeah, you're like you said, it's a moving target. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that my daughters are 9 and it's cool that they actually want to hang out with me. I'm probably 4 years away from not being cool. So I'm going to try to soak this up as long as I possibly can.
as the proud parent of a 13-year-old as well as a 22-year-old.
Yeah.
A 15-year-old. Yeah, I'm teetering
On
on.
the edge.
So what's next? We've talked about some of the things that have happened and some of the timeless stuff. What's coming up for CSP,
Yeah.
for you more specifically?
Yeah, 2024 is actually a very big year for us. Obviously the expansion stuff that I've talked about. We have some pretty big things. In fact, contractor meetings over the next couple of weeks, and we actually just got approval from the city for moving forward with it, whatever it actually becomes. So that's really exciting. Actually doing some app development as well. I won't get into the details on it, but it actually has much more to do with making our client experience better. And it may be something that we spread out to a larger audience pretty soon. So actually getting back into the product development space. And then obviously just to continue to refine the offering both at the facility and then certainly to have a better year as a Yankee staff member than we had last year. It's the goal is always, like I said, fail forward and be better than you were in the past. And that's the really exciting things. I think everyone really gets honed in on like the major league rosters record. And it's very easy to just go tunnel vision on that. But been some really exciting things that we've done in the player development space, some cool collaboration across departments. To be honest, my favorite part of the job is actually amateur draft stuff. I love like just the draft process, evaluating players and trying to build that bridge between scouting and player development. So that's something I'm actually super passionate about. And finding the 19th rounder who's going to become a big leaguer, like to me, that's very exciting. That's been one of the coolest part of the jobs is getting to put my heads together with performance science and our pitching and hitting departments and trying to find these flashes in the pan. So it's been a cool experience.
Very cool. I could probably just ask you all sorts of questions for the rest of the evening, but I want to be respectful of your time and you carving out a little bit of extra time here in spite of it being still a busy time of year. So
this is fun. I always enjoy these conversations. You brought a lot to the industry, and I personally have benefited from a ton of our conversations too. So keep fighting the good fight. I enjoy them.
Thank you so much. And guys, go where can we send people as if they can't find you everywhere?
Yeah, sure. EricCressey.com is a central hub for everything. And then the podcast, which is very heavy in the baseball space, is just EliteBaseballPodcast.com. We need to get a Pat Rigsby a cameo on that very soon. I'll tell your listeners to stay tuned for your foray into that world again.
Love it. Love it. Thank you, Eric. And thank you guys for listening in to another episode of the Fitness Business School.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Fitness Business School. Before you go, I have a quick announcement. One of the things that we've been doing with our current clients is taking them through this ideal business diagnostic. And really what it is this checklist that allows you to pinpoint exactly what your business needs next so you can keep improving, keep growing, and build a business that you love to own. One that pays you well, one that allows you to have the impact you want to have, and one that allows you to have a lifestyle that you truly enjoy. In this diagnostic, we walk through everything and we do an evaluation and can instantly pinpoint what you need to do next to build that business that you want. I'm going to extend this opportunity to get on with either me or my team and take you through this evaluation and fix your business's most vital needs fast. So if we take you through this, you're going to be able to make those vital changes that you need to finally have what I call your ideal business. If you'd be interested in going through this entirely free, risk-free diagnostic with us and learn what you already have in place, what you're doing well, and where your greatest opportunities for rapid improvement are, just shoot me an email with diagnostic in the subject line to pat@patrigsby.com. Again, an email to pat@patrigsby.com with diagnostic in the subject line will get you scheduled and take you through this evaluation to help you build the business you want.